I'm Sharelle Smith, and I'm an alumna of North Carolina A&T State University. Um, the question of defining grief. Grief to me is an emotional state of lowness, sadness, pain, anguish, dealing with losing someone or something. It could be something physical, it could be something emotionally attached to, but that's what grief is to me. How I've dealt with grief in the past has been, especially with my uncle, my favorite uncle, my Uncle Big Cal, when he passed. It was very sudden. It was something that I wasn't expecting. No one was expecting in my family. But I'm not a crier, but with him, I knew I had to let it out, and I cried. I cried, and I cried, and I cried. But then I eventually got myself together once I let the pain out through my tears and started focusing on the good times that I had with him, all those fond memories of him, and how I would want to lead myself in the future to make him happy, make him proud of me. How does grief correlate with guilt? With a lot of people and a lot of friends that I've had that have had to deal with certain situations of death, they feel as though they didn't do enough while the person was around and alive. They kind of regret not taking that last phone call from the person, or going to see that person while they were sick because they were too busy with their own personal lives. But those are the things that I've seen. Would you consider grief as a mental illness? No, I wouldn't consider it a mental illness. Like I said, it's an emotional state. That emotional state could lead to different types of mental illnesses, could lead to manic depression, or lead to certain onsets of schizophrenia or things like that. But I wouldn't consider it itself a mental illness. That goes into the correlation of depression and suicide. Yes, it could. It could trigger depressive states because of the fact of you not being able to deal with that grief appropriately. Yeah, you could stay in that saddened state. You could stay in that painful mourning state. And yes, being in a depressive state for so long, it could trigger those feelings of suicide and wanting the only way out for you to be able to deal with that type of grief is to end it all. Yes. Or you wanting to be with that lost loved one so bad that you're like, I could kill myself just so I could be with them again. Grief has affected my family in one particular way. My second youngest uncle, when my grandmother passed, he was the one taking care of her. And he actually went into seclusion after it. He wouldn't come out the house. He would come out for a short period of time if we went to the house to visit him. And this went on for years, up until, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago. My grandmother's house was in such bad shape, we had to pull him out of the house. We had to make him leave. And so we moved him in with my mother in Maryland. And he kind of sort of came out of his shell, but he still stayed in that state and wanted to be in that state of seclusion. He kind of reverted back to a child, so to speak. My mom had to cook for him. He had to clean up after him. She had to do his laundry. She had to make him go to the doctor. It was like her having another child in the house. So with him, I guess, taking on the responsibility of living and taking care of my grandmother for so long, I don't know what triggered in his mind to go into that state of seclusion. But I guess that's how he dealt with his grief. Financially affected by grief, him never worked. He wouldn't come out to do anything being in such a deep sense of grief. So yeah, he doesn't have a penny to his name. The family, we're taking on that burden and we're helping take care of him. How long should someone grieve? That's a hard one because it depends on the person in this situation. Some people, it does take longer for them to grieve and to work through such an emotional state of loss. But that time period will be better left determined by a mental health professional. And that's what a lot of people don't think of when they're experiencing these times of grief. They forget about that mental health professional. Not that it is a mental illness, but they can help work through that grief, give them exercises, and help them talk through how they're feeling.
Okay.
Do you think people should be allowed time from work? Yes. Yes, from grief. That's why most jobs have that bereavement period during death. Most places give a week for the whole year. But then you have some places that are a little bit more lenient. So yes, take that time. That's what that time is there for you to work through your feelings, for you to come to terms with what happened. But yeah, those are my thoughts on grief.